The dust never settled on Valaris 9. It hung in the air like a constant reminder that this world belonged to the machines and the Empire, not to those who worked its depths. Governor Shivara walked through the mining complex with her usual measured pace. Her scales caught the harsh artificial lights reflecting green and bronze. She carried a data pad that showed production numbers, efficiency ratings, and quotas that always demanded more. Behind her, 2 guards followed at a respectful distance. They knew better than to speak unless spoken to. The Talvine Empire had rules for everything. How to stand, how to address superiors, how to die with honor if necessary. Emotion was weakness. Duty was everything. Shivara had learned these lessons well over her 40 cycles of life. She wore them like armor. "Governor, the morning shift reports are ready," her assistant Krenth said. He was young for a Talvine, barely past his first molting. He still believed in the Empire with the fervor of the untested. "Display them," Shivara said. The numbers scrolled across her datapad. Sector 7 was behind quota again. The human workers there had slowed production to help an injured colleague. Inefficient, emotional, typical of their species. Humans had joined the galactic community only 80 years ago. They were physically weak compared to most species. Their bones broke easily. They needed specific atmospheric conditions to survive. They tired quickly and required frequent rest. By all logical measures, they should have been useless as laborers, yet they adapted. They learned. They created tools to compensate for their weaknesses. And most puzzling of all, they helped each other with an intensity that seemed almost irrational. Shivara had never understood it. She made her way to the observation deck that overlooked the main mining entrance. Hundreds of workers moved in organized lines beginning their shifts. Humans in their lighter equipment. Talvine in reinforced suits. Grexians with their forearms carrying double loads. All species serving the Empire's endless hunger for resources. A human supervisor approached the deck's lower level. Shivara recognized him from previous reports. Park Jiho, 37 Earth years old, mining supervisor for Sector 7. Consistently behind quota, but somehow his teams had the lowest injury rates in the facility. "Governor," Jiho said, bowing his head slightly. Humans had learned to show respect in Talvine fashion, though they still clung to their own strange customs when they thought no one watched. "Your sector is underperforming again," Shivara said. "Explain." Jiho met her eyes for a moment. Another human peculiarity. They made eye contact even with superiors. 2 workers were injured yesterday. We slowed to ensure their safe extraction. Both are recovering well. 2 workers do not justify reducing entire sector output. With respect, Governor, we believe they do. Shivara's inner eyelid flickered, a sign of irritation she quickly suppressed. "Your beliefs are irrelevant. Production quotas are mandated by imperial decree. You will meet them." "We will try our best," Jiho said. Not an agreement. Not quite defiance. Humans had a way of occupying the space between obedience and rebellion. Before Shivara could respond, alarms shrieked through the complex. Red lights bathed the observation deck. Her datapad exploded with emergency notifications. "Tunnel collapse, Sector 4. Krenth shouted. "Major structural failure." Shivara's training took over instantly.
"Seal the sector."
"Emergency protocols now." "Governor, there are 40 workers in that tunnel system," Krenth said, his voice cracking slightly. "Irrelevant. Seal it. If the collapse spreads, we lose 3 additional sectors." Across the observation deck, Shivara saw Jiho stiffen. The human's hands clenched into fists. He said nothing, but something in his expression made her scales prickle with an unfamiliar sensation. The next hour passed in controlled chaos. Engineers assessed the damage. The automated system sealed bulkheads. Production in adjacent sectors halted temporarily, and 40 workers remained trapped behind tons of collapsed rock and twisted metal. Shivara's superior, Overseer Crix, arrived within 2 hours. He was older, larger, his scales darkened with age and authority. He reviewed the situation with cold efficiency. "The tunnel is a loss," Crix declared. "File the workers as casualties. Resume production in the unaffected sectors immediately. Standard protocol. Logical." The Empire did not waste resources on uncertain rescues. 40 lives against potential thousands of lost production hours. The mathematics were clear. "Yes, Overseer," Shivara said automatically, but her eyes drifted to the monitor showing the sealed tunnel entrance. Somewhere behind those reinforced doors, 40 beings were trapped in darkness. 40 beings who had families, perhaps, who had thoughts and fears and hopes. She crushed the thought immediately. This was weakness. This was the kind of emotional contamination that destroyed careers and dishonored bloodlines. Later that evening, as Shivara filed the casualty reports in her office, someone knocked on her door. Unusual. Most waited for permission to even approach. "Enter," she said. Park Ji-ho stepped inside. He was alone. Also unusual. Humans typically moved in groups seeking comfort in their collective presence. "Governor, I need to speak with you about the trapped workers." "There is nothing to discuss. The matter is resolved." "Resolved?" Ji-ho's voice was quiet, but something sharp edged his words. 40 people are still alive down there. Our sensors confirm life signs. The sensors may be faulty. They're not. Ji-ho stepped closer. "Governor, with respect, we can save them. We cannot. The structural instability is too severe. A rescue attempt would risk more lives and resources. And leaving them to die doesn't." Shivara felt her crest rise slightly, an involuntary response to challenge. "You forget your place, human." "Maybe," Ji-ho said. "Or maybe I just remember something you've forgotten." "And what is that?" "What it feels like to be the one trapped in the dark, hoping someone will try." The words hit Shivara like a physical blow. For just a moment she was no longer a governor in her office. She was 20 cycles younger, standing at a ceremony, watching her clutched sibling's name added to a memorial wall. Another tunnel collapse. Another calculated decision. Another life deemed not worth the risk. She had not thought of her sibling in years. Had trained herself not to. "Get out," Shivara said, her voice hoarse. Ji-ho studied her face for a long moment. Then he bowed slightly and left. Alone in her office, Shivara stared at the casualty report on her screen. 40 names, 40 lives reduced to data entries. She tried to feel nothing. Tried to be the perfect Talavine governor. But somewhere deep inside, in a place she thought she had sealed away forever, something began to crack. Outside her window, the dust continued to swirl in the artificial light, and deep beneath the planet's surface, 40 workers waited in darkness, their air slowly running out. Shivara did not sleep that night. The Talavine required less rest than humans, but even her species needed some. Instead, she stood at her apartment window, watching the mining complex's lights pulse in the darkness. Somewhere beneath those structures, 40 workers were trapped. She tried not to think about them. She failed. By morning, she had reviewed the collapse data 17 times. Each review gave the same result. The tunnel system was unstable. Rescue attempts would likely cause additional collapses. The logical choice was clear. The Empire's choice was clear, so why did her mind keep returning to Park Ji-ho's question? What it feels like to be the one trapped in the dark, hoping someone will try. She knew exactly what that felt like. She had been 14 cycles old when her clutch sibling Varsha had been trapped in a mining accident. Young Shivara had begged the supervisors to attempt a rescue. They had explained patiently why it was impossible, why it would waste resources, why emotion had no place in such decisions. Varsha had died in the dark, alone. Shivara had learned an important lesson that day. She had learned to bury her feelings so deep that they could never surface again. She had learned to be strong, or so she had believed. The morning briefing was tense. Overseer Crick sat at the head of the conference table, his presence dominating the room. Shivara gave her report on production resumption. The other sectors were back to full operation. The sealed sector would be cleared and reinforced over the next month. Efficient, clean. "What about the workers' compensation packages?" asked Administrator Thelen, a nervous Grexian who handled personnel matters. "Standard death benefits will be distributed to registered families," Shivara said. Her voice sounded distant even to her own ears. "Excellent," Crick said. "This matter is concluded. Governor Shivara, I will be observing operations for the next few days to ensure stability. The Empire is pleased with your handling of this crisis." Shivara bowed her head. "I serve the Empire," but the words tasted wrong in her mouth. After the meeting, she made her way to the medical facility. She told herself it was routine inspection. She was checking on the injured workers from the collapse's initial tremors. That was all. The medical bay smelled of antiseptic and the sharp tang of various species biochemistries. Kang Mira, the human medic on duty, looked up from her work. She was young for her position, perhaps 28 Earth years. Humans often advanced quickly in positions others found too emotionally taxing. "Governor," Mira said, bowing. "How can I help you?" "I am inspecting the facility. Are the injured workers recovering?" "Yes, Governor." 3 Talveen with minor fractures. 2 humans with respiratory issues from dust inhalation. 1 Grexian with a broken arm. All will return to work within the week. Shivara nodded, making notes on her datapad. Then, despite herself, she asked, "The trapped workers. How long can they survive?" Mira's expression shifted. Something flickered in her eyes. "With the air in those tunnels? Maybe 3 days. We're at hour 26 now." "I see." "Governor," Mira said carefully, "if we could attempt—" "There will be no rescue attempt. The matter is closed." Mira's jaw tightened, but she said nothing more. Shivara left quickly, disturbed by the accusation she had seen in the human's eyes. She was returning to her office when she spotted a group of humans gathered near the sealed tunnel entrance. They were speaking in low voices, gesturing at datapads. Park Jiho stood at their center. Shivara should have continued walking. Should have ignored them. Instead, she found herself approaching. "What is happening here?" she demanded. The humans jumped, startled, all except Jiho, who turned to face her calmly. "We're organizing a rescue team, Governor." The words took a moment to process. "You are what?" "A rescue team. We believe we can reach the trapped workers through a secondary shaft network. It's risky but possible." Shivara felt her scales flush with heat. "I gave no authorization for this." "We're not asking for authorization," Jiho said quietly. "We're informing you as a courtesy. You will do no such thing. This is direct violation of Imperial protocol. I could have you all executed for this defiance." The other humans looked afraid, but Jiho stepped closer, his voice still maddeningly calm. "Then execute us after we save them. You cannot save them." "The structural integrity. We're not Talveen, Governor. We don't need to follow your safety margins. We're smaller, lighter. We can move through spaces you can't, and we're willing to take the risk. Willing to die, you mean? If necessary." Jiho held her gaze. "But we're pretty good at not dying. We're stubborn that way." Shivara wanted to roar at him, wanted to have them all arrested immediately. But something stopped her. Something in the determined faces of these fragile humans who were volunteering to crawl into an unstable death trap for workers they might not even know. "Why?" she asked, the word escaping before she could stop it. "Why risk yourselves for them?" Jiho considered the question. "Because they're people. Because they're scared. Because someone has to try," he paused. "And because if we were down there, we'd hope someone would try for us." There it was again. That same appeal to emotion, to empathy, to all the things Shivara had been trained to suppress. "If Overseer Crix discovers this, he will have you executed," Shivara said. "All of you. We know. He arrives for inspection in 2 hours." Jiho's eyes widened slightly. Then he nodded. "Then we'd better work fast." Shivara watched as the humans began organizing equipment. They moved with practiced efficiency, despite the fear she could smell on them. One woman, who Jiho had called Choi Dayun, was already checking structural support beams. A young man, Lee Taejin, was studying tunnel maps on his datapad. This was madness. This was chaos. This violated every protocol Shivara had spent her life upholding. She should stop them immediately. Instead, she heard herself say, "The inspection will begin at the far sectors. Overseer Crix always starts at maximum distance and works inward. That gives you 4 hours before he reaches this section." The humans froze. They all turned to stare at her. "Governor?" Jiho asked carefully. "I said nothing," Shivara snapped. "I was never here. I saw nothing. Do you understand?" Slowly, Jiho smiled. It was a strange human expression, showing teeth but without aggression. "We understand, Governor. Thank you." Shivara turned and walked away quickly, her heart's pounding. What had she just done? She had aided in protocol violation. She had given rebels information. She had betrayed her oath to the Empire. She had chosen emotion over duty. Back in her office, she pulled up the security feeds. She watched as Jiho's team approached the sealed tunnel with cutting equipment. Watched as they forced open an auxiliary entrance. Watched as they disappeared into darkness. Her datapad showed Overseer Crix beginning his inspection on the far side of the complex. She could delay him slightly with bureaucratic complications. Could claim certain reports needed review. Could buy these foolish, brave humans a little more time. Shivara's hand hovered over her communicator. One call would end this. One word to cricks and guards would seal those tunnels permanently. With the rescue team inside, she thought of Varsha, dying alone in the dark all those years ago. She thought of Park Jiho, walking calmly into that same darkness to save strangers. Shivara closed her communicator and pulled up the facility's maintenance schedules. Time to create some bureaucratic delays. She was a traitor now. The realization should have filled her with shame. Instead, for the first time in 26 years, she felt something that might have been hope. The tunnel was darker than Jiho had expected. His helmet light cut through the blackness, but the beam seemed weak against the weight of stone surrounding them. Behind him, 4 other humans crawled through the narrow auxiliary shaft. Choi Deon carried scanning equipment. Lee Taejin navigated using a handheld mapper. 2 others, Yoon Seojin and Han Ji-won, carried medical supplies and emergency oxygen. Temperatures rising, Deon reported. We're getting close to the collapse zone. Jiho's breathing was steady despite the fear coiling in his stomach. He had been mining for 12 years. He knew what unstable tunnels could do, knew how quickly stone could shift and crush, but he also knew what it felt like to be trapped, to hear the groan of rock above, to wonder if anyone was coming. Someone always had to come. Air quality's getting worse, Seojin said. They've been breathing this for over a day now. Then we move faster, Jiho replied. The tunnel narrowed. Jiho had to turn sideways to squeeze through a gap that no Talveen could have navigated. His suit scraped against rock. For a moment he was stuck and panic fluttered in his chest. Then he exhaled completely and slipped through. Everyone okay? He called back. 4 confirmations echoed in the darkness. They crawled for another 20 minutes. The air grew thick with dust. Several times they had to stop while Daeun checked the stability of the path ahead. Once a small section of ceiling collapsed behind them, cutting off their retreat. No one mentioned it. They all knew the risks. Finally, Taejin's mapper beeped. I've got life signs. 30 meters ahead and down. How many? Jiho asked. Hard to tell through all this rock. At least 20. Maybe more. They descended through a crack in the tunnel floor, using climbing equipment to lower themselves into a larger chamber. Jiho's light swept across the space and he had to stop himself from gasping. The trapped workers were arranged in organized groups. Talveen sat in military formation, conserving oxygen through controlled breathing. Grexians huddled together, their forearms wrapped around each other for comfort. Humans lay in recovery position, some clearly injured. A large Talveen foreman stood in the center. His scales were gray with dust and he held an improvised weapon, a piece of broken pipe. Who are you? The foreman demanded. Rescue team from the surface, Jiho said, raising his hands to show he was unarmed. We're here to get you out. The foreman's eyes narrowed. The Empire sent humans? Where are the proper rescue crews? There are no rescue crews, Jiho said quietly. The tunnel was sealed. You were declared casualties. Silence fell across the chamber. Several workers made sounds of distress. One human began crying softly. Then why are you here? The foreman asked. Because you're still alive, Jiho said simply, and that matters to us. He immediately began organizing the evacuation. The injured would go first. The smaller species could move faster through narrow passages. The Talveen would go last because they could hold their breath longest. The foreman stepped in front of him. I command here. I decide who leaves first. With respect, we're the ones who know the exit route. We decide the order based on who has the best chance of survival. The foreman's crest rose in anger. You dare presume to command Talveen warriors? I presume to save lives, Jiho said. Yours included. Now we can argue about it while everyone's air runs out, or you can trust us to do what we came here to do. For a long moment, the two stared at each other. Then a voice spoke from the group of Talveen warriors. Let them work, Foreman Krask. I do not wish to die debating protocol. The speaker was young, barely past molting. His left arm was badly injured, wrapped in makeshift bandages. Varin, Krask growled. You dishonor yourself with such weakness. Perhaps, the young Talveen said. But I dishonor my family more if I die for pride. Jiho quickly moved to assess the injured. The young Talveen, Varin, had a compound fracture. 2 humans had broken ribs. 1 Grexian was unconscious, probably from hitting his head during the collapse. Kang Mira would have her hands full when they got back. If they got back, Daeun approached Jiho quietly. The path we came through won't support all these people. Too much weight, too much movement. It'll collapse. Can we reinforce it? Maybe, but it'll take time we don't have. Jiho thought quickly. What if we send them through in small groups? 5 at a time. That reduces load on any single section. It also means multiple trips. We'll be exhausted, and every trip increases the chance of total collapse. Do we have another choice? Taeyun shook her head. Then that's what we do, Jiho said. He explained the plan to the group. They would evacuate in waves. The most injured first. Each group would be guided by one human team member. It would take hours. It would be dangerous. But it was possible. You would risk yourselves repeatedly for us? Varan asked. Why? Jiho knelt beside the young Talveen. Because that's what you do for people. Any people. All people. I do not understand your species, Varan said softly. That's okay, Jiho replied with a small smile. Sometimes we don't understand ourselves either. The first group prepared to move. Jiho gave his extra oxygen to Varan. The young Talveen tried to refuse, but Jiho simply attached it to his suit and moved away before he could argue. Wait, Foreman Krask said. You give your oxygen to him? You weaken yourself? He needs it more, Jiho said. This is foolishness. In Talveen culture, the strong survive. The weak are culled. This is the natural order. Jiho turned to face the foreman fully. Maybe in your culture. In ours, the strong protect the weak. That's what makes us strong. You speak in contradictions, do I? Jiho gestured around the chamber. You organized everyone to conserve air. You maintained order and discipline. That's strength. But it's not complete strength. Complete strength is knowing when to accept help. When to put others first. When to be vulnerable enough to trust. Krask's crest flattened slightly. He had no response. The evacuation began. Lee Taejin led the first group, including Var-In and 2 injured humans. They disappeared into the darkness. Everyone else waited in tense silence. 20 minutes later, Taejin's voice crackled over the radio. First group topside. Coming back for the next. A collective sigh of relief swept through the chamber. As they prepared the second group, small tremors shook the tunnel. Dust rained from the ceiling. Everyone froze. The structure's degrading, Daeun said. We need to move faster. But they couldn't move faster without risking lives. It was a terrible calculation, and Jiho felt the weight of every decision. Group by group, they evacuated. With each trip, the tunnels grew more unstable. Han Jiwan nearly fell into a sudden pit. Yoon Seojin was hit by falling rock, bruising her shoulder. But they kept going. Finally, only 8 remained in the chamber. 7 Talveen warriors and Foreman Krask and Jiho. You should go with them, Krask said to Jiho. You are weak. You are already exhausted. I'm fine, Jiho lied. His lungs burned from the thin air. His muscles screamed from exertion. But he wasn't leaving until everyone else was out. Why? Krask demanded. Why do you sacrifice yourself for us? We are nothing to you. My people would never do this for yours. Jiho looked at the Talveen foreman. Maybe that's something your people should think about changing. A deep groan echoed through the tunnel. The walls shuddered. We need to go now, Jiho said. They moved quickly, but the tunnel was collapsing faster than they could climb. Behind them, sections of the chamber were caving in. Ahead, the narrow passage was beginning to close. Krask pushed past Jiho and wedged himself into the narrowing gap, using his greater size and strength to hold the walls apart. Go, he roared. Move, the other Talveen scrambled through. Jiho went last, squeezing past Krask's straining form. Come on, Jiho shouted, reaching back for the foreman. Krask looked at him with something that might have been surprise. Then he released the walls and lunged forward. Rock crashed down behind him, sealing the tunnel forever. They ran through the darkness, the whole system collapsing around them. They could see light ahead, the surface entrance. Hands reached down to pull them up, one by one, into safety. Jiho was the last to emerge. He collapsed on the ground, gasping for air, barely conscious. And standing over him, her face unreadable, was Governor Shivara. Shivara had watched the security feeds with growing dread. Overseer Crix was approaching the sealed sector. Her delays had bought time, but not enough. The humans were still bringing workers to the surface. Any moment now, Crix would discover the violation. She had to make a choice. She could call Crix, report the humans, and save her own position. The logical choice. The safe choice. The choice a proper Talveen governor would make, or she could go to the tunnel entrance herself. Shivara found herself walking. Her feet carried her through corridors without conscious thought. past surprised workers, past security checkpoints, toward the sealed sector where everything was falling apart. When she arrived, the scene was chaos. Rescued workers lay on the ground gasping for air. Kang Mira and her medical team rushed between them, administering oxygen and treating injuries. And emerging from the tunnel entrance, covered in dust and blood, came humans and Talveen together. The last to emerge was Park Ji-ho. He collapsed the moment he reached the surface. His oxygen supply had been depleted. His suit was torn, but he was smiling. "You fool," Shivara whispered. Then she saw Overseer Crix approaching from the far corridor. He had heard the commotion. His eyes were already narrowing with suspicion. Shivara moved without thinking. She stepped between the collapsed workers and Crix's line of sight. She pulled up her datapad and began recording injuries, making it look like she had ordered this, like she was in control. "Governor." Crix's voice cut through the noise. "What is the meaning of this?" Shivara turned slowly. Her training took over. Her voice was steady. "A successful emergency rescue operation, Overseer. I gave no authorization for rescue operations. You reported these workers as casualties. New information came to light," Shivara said. "Structural analysis indicated the collapse was more stable than initially assessed. I determined that a rescue attempt was feasible and cost-effective. It was a lie. A complete fabrication, and Crix knew it." "You determined," Crix said slowly, "without consulting me. There was no time for consultation. I made an executive decision based on available data." Crix's scales darkened with anger. "Show me this data." Before Shivara could respond, another voice spoke. "The data came from our analysis, Overseer." Choi Daeon stepped forward, her suit filthy but her spine straight. She held up a datapad. "We identified a secondary tunnel system that provided safe access to the collapse zone. The governor acted on our engineering assessment." "And who authorized you to make such an assessment?" Crix demanded. "Standard emergency protocol, Overseer. All shift supervisors are required to continuously evaluate rescue options during collapse events." It was technically true, a minor regulation buried in thousands of pages of Imperial code. And Daeon was reciting it with the confidence of someone who had spent hours memorizing every loophole. Crix's eyes narrowed further. He looked from Daeon to Shivara to the rescued workers. Shivara could see him calculating, trying to determine if this was insubordination or clever initiative. Before he could speak, Foreman Krask approached. The large Talveen was covered in dust, but he moved with warrior pride. He saluted Crix with traditional military precision. "Overseer, I must report that the rescue team acted with exceptional skill and courage. Without their intervention, 40 Imperial workers would have been lost. Instead, all survive. This is a victory for the Empire's efficiency." Crix's expression flickered. Krask was a decorated warrior. His word carried weight. "Furthermore," Krask continued, "I must report that the human workers displayed tactical proficiency that exceeded standard expectations. Perhaps the Empire has underestimated the potential applications of human personnel." Shivara felt a surge of surprise. Krask was protecting the humans. The same foreman who had challenged Ji-ho in the tunnels was now defending him. Crix looked around at the assembled workers. Talveen humans, Grexians all watching him, all witnesses to whatever decision he made next. "Very well," Crix said finally. "Governor Shivara, you will provide a complete report on this incident. I will review it personally. If I find any deviation from protocol, there will be consequences." "Of course, Overseer," Shivara said, bowing her head. Crix departed, his displeasure evident in every step. But he was gone, and everyone was still alive. Shivara allowed herself one moment of relief. Then she returned to work, helping coordinate medical treatment and debriefing. As evening fell, she found herself in the medical bay. Most of the rescued workers were being held overnight for observation. The humans had refused treatment until all others were cared for, typical of their species' strange priorities. Park Ji-ho sat on a medical bed, his breathing still labored. Kong Mira had fitted him with a respirator to help his lungs recover. "You should be dead," Shivara said, approaching him. Ji-ho looked up, his eyes tired but bright. "Hello to you too, Governor. Do not make jokes. You risked everything, all of you." "For what?" "For them," Ji-ho said simply, gesturing to the other beds where rescued workers rested. "Wasn't that reason enough?" Shivara sat down slowly. For a long moment she said nothing. Then quietly, "I had a clutch sibling once. Varsha, We were raised together, as is our custom. When I was 14 cycles, there was a mining accident. Varsha was trapped. Jiho listened without interrupting. I begged them to attempt rescue. They explained why it was impossible, why it was illogical, why emotion could not dictate such decisions. They were right by all measures. But Varsha died alone in the darkness, and I learned to bury that part of myself, the part that wanted to scream at them to try anyway. I'm sorry, Jiho said softly. For what? They made the correct decision, did they? Jiho asked. Or did they make the easy decision and call it correct? Shivara's claws clenched. You cannot understand. In Talveen culture, weakness is death. Emotion is weakness. We must be strong. What if you're wrong about what strength means? How dare you? We're weak, Governor, Jiho interrupted. Humans, we're physically weak. We break easily. We die easily. By every measure your empire uses, we shouldn't have survived first contact with galactic civilization. But we did. And do you know why? Shivara stared at him. Because we're strong enough to be weak together. We're strong enough to help each other. We're strong enough to admit when we're scared and still do what needs doing. Your culture thinks emotion is weakness. Maybe emotion is what makes strength real. That is illogical, Shivara said, but her voice lacked conviction. Is it? Jiho leaned forward slightly. You helped us today. You delayed Crix, you covered for us. Why? I do not know. Yes, you do. Shivara stood abruptly. I must go. I have reports to file. She turned to leave, but Jiho's voice stopped her. Thank you, Governor, for giving us that time. You saved lives today, too. Shivara left without responding, but his words followed her through the corridors. That night, she did something she had not done in 26 years. She accessed the memorial records and looked up her clutch siblings' file. Varsha's image appeared on her screen. Young, proud eyes bright with life. I let you die, Shivara whispered to the image. I learned their lesson. I became strong. But the image seemed to ask her the question she had been avoiding all day. What if being strong had cost her something more important? What if Varsha would have wanted her to be brave instead? Shivara pressed her palm against the screen. And for the first time since she was 14 cycles old, she felt tears gathering behind her inner eyelid. She did not let them fall. Not yet. But they were there, pushing against decades of control. In the medical bay, Park Jiho removed his respirator and lay back on the bed. His body ached, his lungs burned, but everyone was alive. All 40 workers had made it out. He thought about Governor Shivara's story about her lost sibling, about the weight she had carried alone for so many years. Maybe she'll learn, he said quietly to the darkness. Maybe they all will. Across the facility, in 40 different beds, 40 workers slept safely. Some were human. Some were Talveen. Some were other species entirely, but tonight, they were all just people who had been saved because someone cared enough to try. And in her office, staring at her clutch sibling's image, Shivara began to understand what courage really meant. 3 days passed in tense silence. Shivara filed her reports. Overseer Crix reviewed them with cold scrutiny. The rescued workers recovered in the medical bay, and everyone waited to see what punishment would fall. On the 4th day, Crix summoned Shivara to the main assembly hall. When she arrived, she found all the facility's workers gathered. Humans, Talveen, Grexians, and others stood in organized rows. At the front, the rescue team stood together. Park Jiho, Choi Dae-yoon, Lee Tae-jin, Yoon Seo-jin, and Han Ji-won. They looked calm, but Shivara could smell their fear. Crix stood on the elevated platform, his presence dominating the space. Behind him, guards waited with weapons. We are gathered, Crix announced, his voice echoing through the hall, to address a significant breach of Imperial protocol. The hall fell silent. 3 days ago, workers in this facility violated direct orders. They attempted a rescue operation without authorization. They risked additional lives and resources. They acted on emotion rather than logic. Shivara felt her heart's pounding. She had to do something. She could not let these humans pay for doing what was right. However, Crix continued, they succeeded. 40 Imperial workers were saved. Production was minimally disrupted, and efficiency metrics show that rescued workers have returned to full productivity ahead of projections. A murmur rippled through the crowd. The Empire values results, Crix said. Regardless of methods, these workers achieved an outcome that benefits Imperial interests. Therefore, no disciplinary action will be taken. Relief washed over Shivara, but it was short-lived. Instead, Crick said, his eyes fixing on Shivara, I must address the failure of leadership that allowed such chaos to occur. Governor Shivara, step forward. Shivara moved to the platform on numb feet. This was it. She had known it was coming. She would be stripped of rank, probably executed, but at least the humans would live. Governor Shivara, Crick said formally, you failed to prevent unauthorized rescue operations. You failed to maintain proper protocol. You failed to consult with superior officers before making critical decisions. Each word was a hammer blow. These failures represent a fundamental weakness in your command. Therefore, by Imperial decree, you are relieved of your position as governor of this facility. The words hung in the air. Shivara bowed her head, accepting her fate. At least it was over. At least. However, Crick said, before this punishment is finalized, Imperial law permits workers to speak in defense of their commanders. Does anyone wish to invoke this right? Silence. Then, movement. The young Talavine Varen stepped forward. His injured arm was still in a support brace, but he moved with dignity. I invoke this right, Overseer. Crick's eyes narrowed. Speak. Overseer Governor Shivara showed wisdom that transcended simple protocol. She recognized a situation that required adaptation. She demonstrated the flexibility that allows the Empire to thrive in unpredictable circumstances. Her actions saved 40 workers, including 7 Talvine warriors. Under the Code of Preservation, any leader who saves Talavine lives from certain death is owed honor, not punishment. The Code of Preservation, an ancient law rarely invoked. But Valid Crix's expression darkened. The Code of Preservation applies only to combat situations. Does it? Farin asked. The code states any circumstance where Talvine lives face extinction. A tunnel collapse qualifies. And Governor Shivara's actions, while indirect, enabled our rescue. She gave the human team the time they needed. She protected them from discovery. She saved us. Other voices joined Varen's. More rescued workers stepped forward. Talvine warriors, human miners, Grexian laborers. One by one, they invoked their right to speak. Foreman Krask was next. Overseer, I witnessed human courage in those tunnels. But I also witnessed Governor Shivara's courage. She risked her position to do what was right. Is that not the highest form of service to the Empire? Crix looked like he might explode. You all speak of emotion, of feelings. The Empire is built on logic and order. Then surprisingly, an elderly human stepped forward. Shivara recognized him from personnel files. Kim Hyunwoo, 73 Earth years old, former diplomat before the Empire absorbed Earth into its territories. May I speak, Overseer? Hyunwoo asked politely. Make it brief. Crix snapped. Hyunwoo pulled out a datapad. I have documented the entire incident, Overseer. Every communication, every decision, every outcome. I believe you'll find it illuminating. Documented? Crix repeated dangerously. Indeed. For instance, I have your original order to seal the tunnels. The timestamp shows you made this decision exactly 8 minutes after the collapse. Emergency protocol requires a minimum 30-minute assessment period before declaring workers irretrievable. You violated protocol, Overseer. The hall went dead silent. Furthermore, Hyunwoo continued calmly, Talvine law states that premature abandonment of Imperial workers constitutes dishonorable waste of resources. The penalty for such waste is removal from command and mandatory tribunal review. Crix's scales flushed dark purple. You dare threaten me? Not a threat, Overseer, simply a citation of Imperial law. The same law you invoke against Governor Shivara. Hyunwoo smiled slightly. My species is very good at documentation. We keep excellent records. The tension in the hall was thick enough to cut. Crix and Hyunwoo stared at each other across the space. Everyone else barely breathed. Finally, Crix spoke through clenched teeth. What do you propose? I propose that Governor Shivara's actions be recognized as emergency initiative within acceptable parameters. I propose that the rescue team be acknowledged for exceptional service. And I propose that we all move forward with a better understanding of how to handle similar situations in the future. And if I refuse, then I submit my documentation to the Imperial Tribunal. They can decide if your actions that day were appropriate. Of course, tribunals take time, during which you would be suspended from command pending investigation. Hyunwoo paused, but I'm sure you'd prefer to avoid such complications. It was blackmail, plain and simple. And it was working. Crix looked around the hall, at the workers watching him, at the guards who had heard everything, at Shivara, who stood frozen in disbelief. Very well, Crix said finally. Governor Shivara's actions will be deemed acceptable under emergency circumstances. The rescue team will receive commendations for Imperial service. This matter is concluded. He turned and left the platform without another word. His guards followed quickly. The moment he was gone, the hall erupted in noise. Workers cheered. The humans hugged each other. Even the normally stoic Talveen showed signs of relief. Shivara stood alone on the platform trying to process what had just happened. She had been saved, not by logic or protocol or Imperial mercy. She had been saved by workers she had considered beneath her. By humans she had thought weak. By a culture that valued documentation and clever words. Park Jiho approached the platform. Congratulations, Governor. You get to keep your job. Why? Shivara asked. Why did you all defend me? I have done nothing to earn such loyalty. You gave us time when we needed it, Jiho said simply. You protected us when you could have turned us in. That's enough. Kim Hyunwoo joined them, putting away his datapad with satisfaction. Besides, Governor, you're learning. That's worth preserving. Learning what? That rules are important, but people are more important. That strength and compassion aren't opposites. That sometimes the bravest thing you can do is admit you were wrong and try to be better. Shivara looked at the gathered workers, at their faces different species but united in this moment, at the humans who had risked everything to save strangers, at the Talveen who had defended her against their own overseer. I do not understand your species, she said quietly. That's okay, Jiho replied with that strange human smile. We'll teach you, if you're willing to learn. Shivara thought of Varsha, of 26 years spent burying emotion and calling it strength, of the fear she had felt watching Jiho disappear into those tunnels, of the relief when he emerged alive. I am willing, she said, and for the first time, she meant it. Later that evening, after the assembly had dispersed and workers returned to their duties, Shivara found herself in the human cafeteria. She had never entered this space before. It was smaller than the main facility dining hall, decorated with strange human artifacts and images from their homeworld. Park Jiho sat at a table with his rescue team. They were eating something that smelled odd but not unpleasant. When they saw her, they started to stand, but she waved them down. May I join you? She asked. The humans exchanged glances, then Jiho nodded. Please, Shivara sat awkwardly. She did not know what to say. How to bridge this gap between species, between cultures, between everything she had been taught and everything she was learning. Thank you, she said finally, for speaking in my defense. All of you. You helped us save them, Choi Daeun said. We help the people who help us. That's how it works. Is it always so simple for humans? Not always, Jiho admitted. But we try to make it that simple. Life's complicated enough without making the important things hard. Shivara nodded slowly. Then hesitantly, what are you eating? Kimchi stew, Lee Taejin said. Traditional Korean food. Would you like to try some? And so Governor Shivara, decorated officer of the Talveen Empire, tried her first taste of human cuisine. It was strange and spicy and burned her throat. She liked it. They talked late into the evening. About food, about if the weeks following the assembly changed something fundamental in the facility. Shivara felt it in the way workers greeted her. Not with fear anymore, but with something closer to respect. It made her uncomfortable. She did not know how to respond. Park Jiho noticed her struggle. He always seemed to notice things. You're trying too hard, he told her one day during sector inspections. I do not understand. You're treating kindness like a task to complete, like checking boxes on a report. That's not how it works. Then how does it work? Jiho considered the question. Come with me tonight. There's something I want to show you. That evening, Jiho led Shivara to the human residential sector. She had never been here before. The hallways were decorated with images, plants and improvised planters and small personal touches that made the sterile facility feel almost alive. They arrived at a large common room. Inside, humans gathered around tables. Some were eating. Others were working on small projects. Children played in one corner. The room hummed with conversation and laughter. This is community night, Jiho explained. Every week we gather. We share food, tell stories, help each other with problems. We just exist together. This serves what purpose? Shivara asked. It reminds us we're not alone, that we matter to each other. Kang Mira spotted them and waved. Governor, join us! We have extra food. Shivara hesitated, but Jiho gently guided her to a table where several humans sat. They made space for her, offered her a plate of something they called bulgogi, and continued their conversation without making her feel like an outsider. Slowly, Shivara began to understand. This was not a formal meeting. There was no agenda, no purpose beyond simply being together, and yet she felt comfortable, almost safe. Governor, a young human woman named Han Jiwon asked, Can I ask you something? You may ask. Do Talavine have anything like this? Community gatherings? Shivara thought carefully. We have formal ceremonies, military gatherings, clan meetings with specific purposes, but no, nothing like this. That sounds lonely, Jiwon said quietly. The word struck Shivara like a physical blow. Lonely. She had never considered herself lonely. She had her duty, her position, her honor. What else did one need? But watching these humans laugh and share stories and simply exist together, she realized what had been missing her entire life. Connection. Not based on rank or duty, but on simple shared existence. Perhaps it is, she admitted. The conversation moved on, but the thought stayed with Shivara. She participated little, mostly listening, observing, learning. At one point, an elderly woman approached with a small child. Governor, this is my granddaughter Minho. She wanted to thank you. The child looked up at Shivara with huge eyes. Then in careful but broken Talvine, she said, Thank you for helping save my papa. Shivara realized with a start that this child's father must have been one of the trapped workers, one of the humans who had been declared dead. Who would have died if not for... You are welcome, small one, Shivara said softly. The child smiled and ran back to play with other children. Shivara watched her go, something tight forming in her chest. That feeling, Jiho said quietly, appearing beside her. That tightness you're feeling right now. That's what it means to care. It hurts sometimes, but it's worth it. How do you bear it? Shivara asked. This constant feeling, this awareness of others' pain and joy, we share it. We don't carry it alone. That's the point of this. He gestured to the room full of people. Community. Over the following weeks, Shivara began accepting more invitations from the human workers. She attended more community nights. She learned to eat Korean food without her throat burning. She even learned some human phrases, though her pronunciation made them laugh. But more importantly, she began to change how she governed. She established weekly meetings where workers could voice concerns directly. Not formal grievances, but simple conversations about what could be improved. The first few meetings were awkward, with workers unsure if this was some kind of test. But gradually, they began to trust. She also started walking through the facility differently, not just inspecting but talking to workers, asking how they were, learning their names, understanding their lives beyond their production numbers. The other Talavine in the facility watched her with suspicion. Some thought she had gone soft. Others whispered that she had been contaminated by human weakness. But Shivara found she did not care as much as she once would have. One evening, she was reviewing reports in her office when someone knocked. It was Varen, the young Talvine warrior who had been rescued from the collapse. Governor, may I speak with you? Of course, sit. Varen settled into a chair, his movements still slightly stiff from his healing injury. Governor, I wanted to thank you for what you did during the collapse, for giving the humans time to save us. You already thanked me. At the assembly. Yes, but I wanted to speak privately. To tell you that what you did changed something for me. He paused. My entire life I was taught that emotions are weakness, that caring about others makes you vulnerable. But watching those humans risk everything to save us, watching you protect them despite the danger to yourself, I realized maybe we were taught wrong. Shivara felt that tightness in her chest again. What will you do with this realization? I do not know yet, but I wanted you to know that you are not alone in questioning our culture's teachings. There are others who wonder if strength and compassion might coexist. After Varen left, Shivara sat in her office for a long time, thinking. She pulled up her data pad and began composing a message. Not a report, not a formal communication, just thoughts. She sent it to Park Jiho. 10 minutes later, he appeared at her door. "You wrote that you want to understand human leadership philosophy better," he said. "Really understand it, not just observe it." "Yes, then I'll teach you. But you have to be willing to do something that will be very difficult for you." "What is that?" "You have to be willing to be vulnerable, to admit what you don't know, to ask for help, to accept that you might be wrong." Shivara's first instinct was to reject this, to defend her pride, her position, her Talvine dignity. But she thought of little Minho thanking her, of Varan questioning his culture's teachings, of 40 lives saved because someone was brave enough to care. "I am willing," she said. And so began Shivara's true education. Jiho taught her about collaborative decision-making, about listening to understand, not just to respond, about the difference between commanding respect and earning it, about how admitting mistakes made leaders stronger, not weaker. They met several times a week, late in the evening when the facility was quiet. Sometimes other humans joined them. Kang Mira taught her about emotional intelligence. Choi Dayun explained how human engineering teams work together, sharing knowledge instead of competing. Kim Hyun-woo shared stories of Earth's history, of leaders who had changed the world not through force but through vision and compassion. Shivara absorbed it all like parched earth drinking rain. One night, after a particularly long discussion about moral courage, Jiho said, "You know, you're doing something remarkable." "What do you mean?" "You're changing who you are. That's harder than any physical challenge, harder than crawling through collapsed tunnels or facing down overseers. You're questioning everything you were taught, everything you believed. That takes real courage." "I do not feel courageous," Shivara admitted. "I feel confused, lost. Like I am betraying everything I was raised to be." "Maybe you're not betraying it. Maybe you're evolving it. Taking the strength of your culture and adding compassion to it. That's not weakness. That's growth." "My people would not see it that way." "No, probably not." Jiho leaned back in his chair. "But maybe someday they will. Change starts with one person willing to be different. Maybe that person is you." The thought terrified and thrilled Shivara in equal measure. 1 month after the rescue, the facility held a memorial ceremony for all workers who had died in mining accidents over the past year. It was a human tradition, one that had slowly been adopted by other species in the facility. Shivara was asked to speak. She stood before the assembled workers, looking at the wall where names were inscribed. So many names, so many lives reduced to letters. She saw her clutch sibling's name from 26 years ago. "Varsha, I have served the Empire for many years," Shivara began, her voice carrying across the silent hall. "I have followed protocol. I have maintained efficiency. I have done my duty." She paused, searching for words. "But I did not understand what I was sacrificing to do these things. I did not understand that every name on this wall represents not just a loss of resources, but a loss of potential, of laughter and dreams and love, of people who mattered to someone." Her voice cracked slightly. She did not try to hide it. "One of those names is my clutch sibling. Varsha died in a mining accident when I was young. I was taught to accept this as necessary, as logical, as the price of imperial efficiency." She looked directly at the human section of the crowd. "But recently I learned something from the humans among us. I learned that sometimes the logical choice is not the right choice. I learned that caring for others is not weakness, but the highest form of strength. I learned that courage is not the absence 6 months after the rescue." The Imperial Tribunal reached its decision. The message arrived on Shivara's datapad early one morning, official and cold. She read it 3 times before the words truly registered. Governor Shivara was stripped of her official position. However, in recognition of the complex circumstances and the positive outcomes, she would not be executed. Instead, she was offered a choice. She could return to the Talvine homeworld where she would live in reduced status but remain part of society. A kind of soft exile but still among her own people. Or she could remain on Valaris 9 as a cultural liaison. A meaningless title, really. Everyone would know it meant she had been demoted, disgraced, essentially exiled to the frontier forever. Shivara sat with the datapad for a long time. Her entire life she had worked toward advancement in the Empire, toward honor and status and recognition. Returning to the homeworld, even in disgrace, would at least keep her connected to her culture, her people, her history. But staying here, She thought of community nights in the human sector, of learning to eat kimchi without burning her throat, of Varen's tears at the memorial, of little Minho thanking her for saving her father, of Park Ji-ho patiently teaching her what leadership really meant. She thought of Varsha, and what her clutch sibling would have wanted for her. The choice was easier than she expected. She sent her response to the tribunal. Then she went to find Ji-ho. He was in Sector 7 reviewing production schedules with his team. When he saw her approaching, he smiled, that strange human expression that showed teeth but meant friendship. "Governor," he said, "or should I call you something else now?" "You heard?" "Everyone heard. The tribunal's decision came through official channels an hour ago." He studied her face. "What did you choose?" "I am staying." The humans around them erupted in cheers. Choi Daeun hugged her, which was startling but not unpleasant. Lee Taejin raised his fist in what she had learned was a gesture of victory. Even the normally reserved Yoon Seojin was grinning. "You chose us over your homeworld?" Ji-ho asked quietly, under the noise of celebration. "I chose where I could do the most good," Shivara said, "and where I could continue learning." "Is that acceptable?" "More than acceptable." Ji-ho's smile widened. "Welcome home, Shivara." Home. She had never thought of this industrial mining facility as home, but hearing the word, she realized it was true. This place with these people had become something she had never had before, a place where she belonged. The next weeks brought changes. Without her official position, Shivara had to find a new role. The humans helped. They created a position for her as a cross-species coordinator, helping different species work together more effectively. She discovered she was good at it. Her Talavine training and organization and her newly learned human skills and empathy combined into something unique. She could speak to Talavine workers in terms they understood, while also helping them see perspectives they had never considered. Slowly, the facility transformed. Production remained strong, but safety improved. Different species began mixing more freely. The rigid hierarchy that had defined everything began to soften into something more collaborative. Not everyone approved. Some Talvine workers complained that she had betrayed her kind. Some humans worried she was still too imperial in her thinking. But most recognized that she was trying, genuinely trying, to build something better. 3 months after the tribunal decision, a new crisis emerged. A disease outbreak swept through the facility, affecting all species but hitting the Grexians particularly hard. The medical bay was overwhelmed within days. Kang Mira worked around the clock, but there were not enough medical staff. Not enough supplies. Not enough space. Shivara found herself in the medical bay, watching Mira's exhausted team struggle to save lives. She thought of the tunnel collapse, of Park Ji-ho's rescue team risking everything to help. "What do you need?" she asked Mira. The medic looked up, her eyes red with fatigue. "Everything. More hands, more supplies, more time. Then you will have it." Shivara left the medical bay and began organizing. She pulled workers from non-essential duties. She converted a storage facility into an emergency treatment center. She reached out to human contacts to access traditional remedies that might help. But most importantly, she organized volunteers. "I need people willing to work in the medical facilities," she announced at an emergency assembly. "This disease is dangerous. You might get sick yourselves. But without help, people will die. I am asking for volunteers, not ordering. Who will help?" Hands rose throughout the crowd. Humans, yes, but also Talvine, Grexians who had already recovered, even species that rarely interacted with others. They came together because someone had asked. Because it was right. Because they had learned, slowly but surely, that caring for each other was not weakness. Shivara worked alongside them. She had no medical training, but she could carry supplies, clean equipment, comfort the scared and sick. She worked until her body ached and her mind fogged with exhaustion. On the 3rd day, as she was helping move a delirious Grexian patient, Park Ji-ho found her. "You need to rest," he said firmly. "There is too much to do. There's always too much to do. But you're no good to anyone if you collapse." He guided her to a chair. "Sit, 5 minutes." Shivara sat and immediately felt how exhausted she was. Her muscles trembled. Her scales were dull with fatigue. "I'm afraid," she admitted quietly. "What if we cannot save them all? What if my efforts are not enough?" "Then you tried," Ji-ho said, sitting beside her. "That's all anyone can ask. You're doing everything possible, That's courage, Shivara. Real courage. It does not feel like courage. It feels like terror. That's how we all feel. You're not weak for admitting it. You're brave for doing it anyway. He smiled. Someone wise once taught me that. Who? You did. At the memorial ceremony. When you let yourself cry in front of everyone. When you chose compassion over protocol. You taught me that even the most rigid people can learn to feel. Shivara looked at him with surprise. I taught you. You have been teaching me. Maybe we taught each other. That's how it works with friends. Friends, another human word that had seemed strange at first. But now, yes, Shivara said softly. Friends. The outbreak lasted 2 weeks. They lost 3 workers despite everyone's best efforts. Each death hurt. Shivara mourned them properly this time, allowing herself to feel the grief instead of burying it. But they saved 47 others who would have died without the coordinated effort. 47 lives because people worked together, because they cared enough to try. When it was over, when the last patient was released from care, Shivara stood in the emptied emergency treatment center. She was exhausted emotionally and physically, but she also felt something that might have been pride. We did it, Kang Mira said, appearing beside her. The medic looked like she might fall over at any moment. We actually did it. You did it, Shivara corrected. I merely helped. You organized everything. You convinced people to volunteer. You worked as hard as anyone. Mira smiled. You saved lives, Shivara. Later that evening, the facility held an impromptu celebration. Nothing formal, just workers gathering to share food and relief that the crisis was over. Humans, Talveen, Grexians, all mixing freely in a way that would have been unthinkable 6 months ago. Shivara found herself at the center of a conversation between a Talveen engineer and a human logistics coordinator. They were discussing how to improve emergency response systems, speaking to each other with respect and genuine collaboration. It is different now, Varan said, appearing at her side. The young Talveen had volunteered extensively during the outbreak. The facility, the way people interact. You did this, not me alone. Many people contributed, but you showed us it was possible. You showed us that a Talveen could choose compassion without losing strength. That changed everything for people like me. Shivara looked around the room, at faces from multiple species laughing and talking together. At the memorial wall visible through a window, where 3 new names would be added but 47 others would continue living. At Park Jiho across the room watching her with that knowing human smile. Perhaps I did help, she acknowledged, but I could not have done it without learning from the humans. They taught me what courage really means. And what is that? Courage is not the absence of fear. It is not suppressing emotion or always being strong. Courage is allowing yourself to feel, to care, to be vulnerable, and then choosing to act anyway. It is weeping for others and then standing up to fight for them. It is admitting you were wrong and trying to be better. Varan was quiet for a moment. Then, I am trying to be better too. You have inspired more than just me, Governor. There are others questioning the old ways, wondering if strength and compassion can coexist. I am not a governor anymore. No, you are something better. You are a teacher. A bridge between what we were and what we could become. Years passed. Shivara never returned to the Talveen homeworld. Valaris 9 became her home in truth. The facility became known throughout the Empire as an example of effective cross-species cooperation. Other colonies began requesting human advisors. Slowly, grudgingly, imperial policies began to shift. Not everywhere, not quickly, but it started.